Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Confident Coaching Podcast. I'm Gillian, and we are going to talk about today one of the things that I often hear from nutrition coaches who have tried a non macro focused approach before, and it's often like it doesn't work, or my clients don't stick to it. And I thought that we could dive in this podcast about why a lot of non-tracking approaches fail, especially when we are trying to help individuals change their nutrition or reach a goal, and either the client already has experience with macros or the coach is very sort of committed to a macro tracking approach. And we often do see clients who will say, oh, well, I can't hold myself accountable without tracking, or, I go overboard when I'm not tracking. And so we often take that as, well, non-tracking approaches fail. And I want to talk about the specific reasons why they fail, and then also what we can do to fix it. And this is a question that I've gotten inside my coaching mentorship before. And I wanted to share specifically, this has come up multiple times, but there's one that really stands out to me. And I think that this illustrates really well kind of what happens when clients, especially clients that are used to tracking macros or used to sort of the diet approach, what can happen here. And so the coach's question was, my client says she doesn't want to track anymore, but anytime she stopped tracking, she felt like she was lacking structure and couldn't hold herself accountable. And often what I see from coaches is like, well, tracking must be the right fit for this client because tracking macros is the only thing that helps them stay on track. And I want us to start thinking about this in a little bit of a different way. Is that someone that needs macro, so someone that is so reliant on macro tracking to quote unquote stay on track or make, values line choices or healthy eating choices, is an amazing candidate for someone that needs to move away from macro tracking, because if that person can only stay accountable when they are weighing and measuring their food, there is underlying food rigidity, there is likely fear, there is likely a lack of decision making skills, and that anxiety around not tracking reveals that they are over relying on this external form of control. And the reason being is that our lives demand so much flexibility, whether we're going on vacation or whether we're eating out at someone else's house. And when we see clients become highly reliant on macros, or coaches that are telling clients like, well, you can't reach your goals unless you track, that's really problematic, because so many of the individuals that are tied to macros really do struggle with, well, anxiety or fear or worry when they're not tracking, which means that is specifically what we need to work on, is not tracking. And so let's go into why non-tracking approaches fail for both clients and coaches. So this can go for whether you as a coach are trying to implement an approach that doesn't involve weighing and measuring food with a client, you're like, this isn't working. Or if you see a client and they've said, well, oh, I've tried to stop macro tracking in the past, but it's never worked before. So this goes for both of these things. So the first thing that comes up is lack of structure. So a lot of the time, what we see is that when someone is tracking macros, or when a coach is helping a client track macros, they are planning out meals. They have a framework for how they build meals, usually around protein, and then kind of filling everything else out. And we kind of have this binary approach, right? Where it's like either you're tracking macros or you're just eating intuitively, right? But if we have an understanding of what intuitive eating is not just eating whatever we want. Intuitive eating actually does have a framework. That's not the focus of this podcast. But if you'd like to learn more about intuitive eating, of course, I'm happy to chat with you about it. But often what we see happen is someone that is either tracking their macros, they're being quite structured in the way that they plan their meals, the way that they carry out their meals, the way that they plate their meals. And then when they're not tracking, that structure just kind of goes out the window. And so this is where a non-tracking approach also needs to include structure. And this is where we can look at meal planning outside of doing it in an app or planning it around numbers. We can use meal planning templates, mindful food journaling. We can help clients identify patterns within their week of, oh, these are the days that I do need to plan more versus these are the days that I don't. And this is where, as coaches, it's so helpful for us to frame this for clients as structure needs to include self-reflection. It needs to be based on an iteration process. We can't just set a structure and then say this is what is going to work every day. We know that, for example, with macros, when someone is trying to hit the exact same macro count every single day, that doesn't take into consideration fluctuation of hunger or fluctuation of life circumstances or of needs or of activity levels. And so part of offering this structure in a non-tracking approach also needs teaching clients how to iterate that structure and build on that structure, which kind of brings us to the next two things that I want to talk about, which is non-tracking approaches tend to fail because they don't address the inflexible or all or nothing thinking that the individual or the coach tends to have around tracking. And so most individuals will struggle with, well, when I'm not tracking, I go overboard. I've heard clients say before, when I'm not tracking, it feels like calories don't count. In the question that I mentioned before from my mentorship client, their client was saying, I don't feel accountable when I'm not seeing the numbers in front of me on the app. And this is actually representative of binary, inflexible, or all or nothing thinking. So we call this in the research, we call this dichotomous thinking, right? It is either this thing or it is this other thing. And coaches talk all the time about how important it is to build a flexible mindset, but that flexible mindset needs to be applied to a non-tracking approach in the sense that sometimes we will be eating 3 meals and 2 snacks, and those meals will be planned ahead of time. And we also need to recognize that some days we will want to eat other things. Some days we will have higher levels of hunger, and we need to address with our clients their all or nothing thinking. We can illustrate it to them. We can help them build the capacity to think in a more flexible way by following the next two things that I'm going to talk about. So far we have lack of structure and not addressing inflexible or all or nothing thinking. The third thing that is a reason why non-tracking approaches fail is often the coaching approach neglects internal body cues or decision-making skills. And essentially what that is when we have a balanced approach to eating, we are balancing internal wisdom with external wisdom. So external wisdom is like how many calories are in that thing or how much protein is in chicken, right? That is nutrition information. Internal wisdom is what is actually happening in my body and in my life to drive or affect my eating habits or my choices, right? And so non-tracking methods will often still try to rely on a lot of external tools. So I will see coaches that are like, well, I'm trying to get my clients to use hand portions. I'm trying to get my clients to use the balanced plate model. But that is still neglecting the importance of the internal signals and the decision-making skills that your client needs in order to trust themselves to make choices that align with their goals around food. And so what that means is clients need to be building interoceptive awareness skills, so understanding what their hunger and fullness feels like. They also need to understand the different types of hunger so that they can identify, ooh, I know when I'm in these situations, I do tend to want to eat even though I'm not hungry. That's where the decision-making skills come in. And I like to do this the way that I help coaches do this in mentorship is we talk about values, and I do this with my one-on-one clients as well, is we use values as a guide for decision-making skills alongside those internal cues, right? So an example of this might be you're not hungry, but someone brings over this really delicious like homemade cookie. It's amazing. And they're going to sit down and have a coffee with you and eat the cookie. That might be a values aligned choice, is to sit down, enjoy the cookie, even though you're not physically hungry. However, it may not be a values aligned choice to say, ooh, I'm not physically hungry. There's a cookie there, but I'm kind of stressed. I just want a distraction from work. And so part of non-tracking approaches is helping clients develop both an awareness of those internal signals and those decision-making skills so that they're using the structure in conjunction with these signals and skills. And that is going to help them move into so many different experiences in their lives without needing that external form of control, right? And then the last thing here is often non-tracking approaches ignore how emotional eating is. And often what I'll see is someone that is focusing on macros will notice, for example, evening emotional eating, right? Say, oh, well, I'll just plan for a healthy snack. And we're neglecting the fact that the need for that snack may be driven by hunger. It may not be driven by hunger, but there's an emotional component here. And so when we are coaching clients on non-tracking approaches, they must include an emotional component so that the client can become a master of their own emotions, understand how they respond in different scenarios, understand the difference between emotional hunger and physical hunger. We need to help them develop coping skills, and we need to help them understand how their emotions and their eating behaviors are connected. And part of that is empowering the individual to be able to make choices about how they respond to their emotions. Because just like sitting down at Christmas dinner and you're surrounded by people you love and there's food, that is a positive, a potentially positive emotional eating experience. Being alone and sad and lonely and frustrated and, diving into a chocolate bar, that's a negative emotional eating experience. But both of them are related to emotion, and an effective non-tracking approach must address this. And so let's talk about how to fix it. The first thing that I'm going to say here is listen to your clients, because they're going to give you indications of the ambivalence they're experiencing. They're going to share with you, like I mentioned at the beginning, where my mentorship client said, hey, her client is noticing that when she doesn't track, she feels like there's no structure or there's no accountability. That is amazing information for you to say, ooh, okay, what is going on in my client's thought patterns or in their behaviors that are leading to them feeling like they're accountable to an app, but not accountable to themselves. And that's really helpful information for you to then take to drive how you coach that client, right? And also, if you listen to the last podcast, you became aware of some warning signs that macro tracking is not working for your clients. And this is really helpful for you to be aware of, because you may have clients who say, I want to keep tracking macros, but you're seeing all of these red flags. So you're not just listening to what your client is saying, you're also listening to what they are doing, right? The next thing that we need to make sure is that we are still offering structure and guidelines. It's not like, oh, you're not tracking. Just feel like what you feel. No, absolutely not. We can coach clients to develop their own meal planning process. We can guide them using food journaling. And one of the ways that I like to approach this is by using their food journal as a tool for them, not just a tool for me to see what they're eating, and actually talk about it in a way that fosters mindfulness and awareness of, ooh, this is what it's on my plate and how it affected me. We can track habits or behaviors, and we can use that tracking of habits and behaviors just like any other forms of data. Whether you did a behavior, whether you didn't do a behavior, that is data. Data is not just numbers or, seeing a chart of, where someone's weight is going. And we also can offer guidelines around, hey, this is what a generally healthy eating pattern looks like. Let's work to make your eating patterns look similar to that. We need to address the emotional connection with food. We need to help clients understand their emotional drivers of eating, their emotional patterns of eating, and be able to differentiate between the different types of hunger. We also need to make sure that we are coaching interoceptive awareness and decision-making skills. And so I have so much content on this for my mentorship clients, and we talk quite a lot about this in our coaching calls of how do we help individuals develop more of an expertise on their own bodies. And we often, in the context of macro tracking, we talk about bio. And when clients are able to recognize their own internal cues of hunger, fullness, psychological satisfaction, and also recognize when they're driven to eat outside of hunger and fullness and be able to make choices around that, when they master that, they are completely unstoppable, because they no longer need external things to quote unquote keep them on track. And so they create accountability to their internal world rather than accountability to what someone else is telling them to eat or what their macro tracking app is telling them to eat. And then when it comes to decision making, really fostering their ability to make choices rooted in their core values, I think that is a non-negotiable part of a non-tracking approach to eating. And then the very last thing that I'll mention that is so important for coaches to be able to support their clients with is defining alternative progress metrics with your client. And often I will see coaches go in and they're like, these are the metrics that I encourage clients to track. And there's some flexibility within there, but when we use core values as a part of our approach to coaching, our clients can also use those values to define their progress metrics. For example, someone that really values their Friday evening pizza nights, they may have a progress metric around how they experience that pizza night. Maybe previously they were thinking about food the whole time, or, they were really closely watching how much they ate. And now they're looking at those Friday night pizza nights and they're recognizing that they're so much more present with their friends and family. They're able to really be in the moment rather than thinking about, what have I eaten? What shouldn't I eat? I must eat this. And so when we look at those progress metrics, not just on a daily basis, on a weekly basis, on a monthly basis, based on both their physical goals, their health goals, but also their social and emotional and values-based goals, that can be a really powerful tool to help your clients not just change how they eat and exercise, but actually change their lives. And so that is what I have for you today. I really want to encourage you to challenge the assumption that non-tracking methods are less effective than macro tracking. It is simply a different form of structure, and it will include a lot more input from your clients. And including input from your clients and empowering your clients, giving your clients autonomy over their process, builds your clients' critical thinking skills. It builds their ability to maintain the results that they create with you. And so I want you to do this. I want you to think about one client, either a past client or a present client, who may be kind of dependent on tracking, whether they believe they need tracking to keep them on track, whether they are currently tracking and they're thinking like, oh God, I don't know if I can let go of this because every time I don't track, I overeat. What is one skill or tool that you can introduce to help them relieve a little bit of pressure on macros and build some of that internal accountability, whether it is helping them develop more awareness of their hunger and fullness skills, helping them use their values for decision making, shifting some of your progress metrics? Consider that. And I will leave you with this. I am opening the doors for my coaching mentorship, the Confident Coaching Mentorship. Brand new group of coaches coming in, and all of these coaches are ready to expand their coaching practice beyond macro tracking and master the communication skills and coaching methods that clients need for sustainable results. Within the Confident Coaching Mentorship, we help you develop a non-tracking approach that includes everything that I mentioned in this episode. And I want to share some feedback from one of my mentorship coaches. And I asked her, how has your coaching changed since you began mentoring? And she had written quite a lot. And so I've just cut it down to one paragraph here. But she says, I feel more confident as a coach with regards to tackling more difficult challenges with clients. For example, honor nothing thinking, body image, food rules, and mindful eating. My clients are more adherent than ever. I am now involving my clients in changing and setting new goals. And my check-in process is completely different. Now it allows for so much more client reflection. And I'm proud to say that all but one of my clients are tracking macros. And this has been such a good transition for me as a coach and also for my client results. So you will find details for the Confident Coaching Mentorship waitlist in the show notes. When you sign up for the waitlist, you get an email with all of the details and a breakdown of everything that's included. You can also reach out to me on Instagram if you would like to chat about the Confident Coaching Mentorship, or you can set up a quick 20-minute Zoom chat with me and we can talk about what's going on in your business, what your goals are, how you would like to develop your coaching practice. And with that, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for listening, and I will see you again next time.